The story I'm about to tell you is quite startling. A couple of years ago, back when I lived in the woods, I had a very close call with something coming into my house. At that time, I was working the late shift down at the local gas station, which meant I got off around 11 o'clock. Whenever I'd get off, it would be pitch black out, making my drive into the woods all the more creepy. I lived about 20 minutes away, 10 of which were in the woods. At this time, I had no neighbors, but I did have a college roommate of mine that would often swing by from time to time. One evening, when I was pulling into my driveway, I was shocked to see that my front door was wide open. I got out of my car, hesitantly, using my cell phone as a flashlight. The first thing that came into my mind was that someone broke into my house, but then I realized how unlikely that really was. It was probably my old college roommate forgetting to lock the door, and a gust of wind must have blown it open. This wouldn't be the first time he has done something like this. As I got closer to my door, I was able to detect a smell that I can't really describe, but nonetheless, it was terrible and very unique. The door being opened and the smell made me feel very uneasy. I slowly entered my darkened home with great caution, with the feeling that at any moment something could jump out and attack me. Thankfully, once I turned on the lights, it revealed that there was nothing there. I then entered my home, closing the door behind me and locking it. I did a quick walkthrough of my house, just making sure that there was nothing else lurking in the shadows. Thankfully, my search yielded no results. I then took a shower and got ready for bed. Instead of falling asleep quickly, like I normally do, I was kept awake with the thought that there was still something hiding in my house. After about 30 minutes, I fell asleep. A couple hours later, I slowly wake up. I wasn't alerted by a bad dream or by a sound, but rather a smell. The exact smell that was there when my door was wide open. I slowly get to my feet and make my way over to the door. As I'm walking, I can hear sounds coming from downstairs. It sounds like something is thrashing around, looking for something. I idiotically make my way towards the stairs, turning on the hallway light as I go. Once I turn on the hallway light, the sound downstairs immediately stops. I had unknowingly made my presence known. The very brief silence is immediately replaced by more thrashing heading towards the stairs. I decided that I didn't want to wait to see what it was that was making the noise downstairs, so I immediately turned tail and ran back to my room. The way my hallway is set up upstairs is that there is a bedroom, a bathroom, and then my room. I was able to enter my room and close the door behind me while locking it before the thing was able to make it up to the top of the stairs. Thankfully, whatever it was, decided to enter the other room first instead of mine. This gave me enough time to hide in the crawl space in my closet. The crawl space was pretty well hidden. You wouldn't be able to find it unless you moved around some clothes. I could hear the door to my room being opened, and something very large walking in my room. I could hear furniture being moved, items being thrown. The worst part about all of this was the smell. The smell was absolutely terrible and stronger than ever. At this moment, it finally dawned on me to call 911, but when I went to do so, I couldn't find my cell phone. I must have left it behind in all the rush. I then heard the closet door being opened and hearing something very large stepping inside. A part of me wanted to peer out and see the intruder that was in my home, but I didn't want to risk being seen. I sat quietly as the intruder rummaged around my closet, thankfully not finding me. I was able to hear the intruder's breathing. It sounded as if whatever the person had bad asthma or a smoking problem because they were hacking and wheezing. It definitely sounded unnatural. The intruder left my closet and went back downstairs. At this moment, I took it upon myself to find my cell phone and call 911. Throughout the call, I was able to hear the intruder downstairs. It was pacing around and moving items as if it was looking for something or someone. I did my best throughout the call to stay quiet while telling the dispatch where I was and what was happening. They told me to go back and hide in the closet, which I did, and wait for the police to come. By the time they arrived, whoever was in my house was long gone. I didn't leave the closet until the police came to get me. I could tell that they were very surprised to see me okay, and they kept asking me over and over again if I was hurt, which I obviously wasn't. The police escorted me out of my home and out into one of the cruisers. While walking out of my home, I was able to see how messy my house was, and it was very trashed. Something I noticed that was interesting was what looked like blood all over my furniture. Why was there blood on my furniture, I thought. The red substance was all over my home, and I was quite concerned as to what it was. I guess that explains why the police thought I was injured. I went outside and sat in one of the cruisers. The police gave me the option to either stay at my house or come down to the precinct and stay the night there. I obviously chose the second option. Fast forward 2 years. I had moved from my house that I was once living in, and I was living in the other part of town. For whatever reason, I was driving near my old house near the woods, and something in the road caught my eye. There was something pale hunched over in the middle of the road. I was about 50 yards away, and I couldn't really make out the details of what was in the middle of the road. But there was something I did recognize. The smell. It was the very same smell I smelled that night that intruder entered my home, and that experience was brought to my mind. I slowly inched closer with my car. I was wanting a better look at whatever it was in the middle of the road. At first, I thought it was a person. I could only see its back, but the closer I got, the more I realized that it wasn't. Its limbs and arms were terribly distorted. Its legs bent backwards like a goat, and the thing was pretty tall, even though it was hunched over. Whenever I was able to see it perfectly, it was as if it knew, and it stood up. The creature was about 8 feet tall. Its skin looked old and wrinkly. Everything about it looked human, except for its head. Its head was that of a deer or maybe an elk, and all the skin and flesh had withered away from it. I was only able to see it perfectly for a few seconds before it ran off into the woods, but the very image of this thing will haunt me forever. Could this creature be the thing that entered my home that one evening? Or maybe these two events are unrelated. Regardless, ever since then, I never go near the woods at night. This story was told to me in 2009. I was a freshman in high school, and it was Halloween. Halloween just happens to be my favorite holiday. Anyways, I walk into my English class, which was my last period for the day. My eccentric teacher had all of the lights off, with a stool in the middle of the room. On the stool was a single candle that was lit. Next to the candle was a bowl of candy with our favorite candies inside. My teacher, who was kind of a goofball, was wearing a cool witch hat. Once everyone sat down inside the class, my teacher held the candle and sat down on the stool. She told us that instead of doing classwork today, we were going to share the scariest story that we knew in return for some candy. My teacher started the stories with the famous urban legend with the man with the hook for a hand. Most of my classmates had heard that story before, but nonetheless, we enjoyed hearing it again. My classmates then took turns telling their stories. Some stories were spooky, while others were kinda lame. But none of them compared to one story that I heard. The story came from one of the redneck kids in my class. He was mostly quiet and didn't really talk much. That's why we're kinda surprised that he wanted to share one of the stories. Anyways, here's his story. His father and his uncle both had a cabin that they would use to go hunting up in the winter. The cabin was up north and kind of up in the hills. To get to the cabin, you'd have to drive about 2 hours deep into the woods, most of which was on a dirt road. Off the dirt road a little bit was about a 15-minute hike to the cabin. The cabin was pretty secluded. He said that his family uses the cabin mainly for hunting. The story then took a weird turn when the father and the uncle in the story returned for the evening after a long day of hunting. As they were walking down one of the hills to get to the cabin, the uncle in the story noticed a light coming from the cabin. Not just one light, but multiple. The lights were torches. There was a cult performing a ritual just outside the cabin. The dad and the uncle took position behind a tree and aimed their guns down at the cult. The cult was chanting something, but they couldn't really understand what it was. After a few minutes of watching what was happening, they noticed a large figure step within the view of the cult. It was a strange monster, unlike anyone had ever seen. It was tall and pale, and had very long talons for fingers. The head of the creature looked like a goat, due to its horns. When the creature got close enough to the cult, the chanting stopped. The creature appeared to be talking to the cult members. At that very moment, out of nowhere, the uncle opens fire on this creature and hits it a couple times. The father does the same. The father and the uncle only aim at the creature and not the cult members. The creature lets out this terrible scream and takes off into the night. The rest of the cult members run off into the woods, never to return. The father and the uncle didn't stay the night in the cabin. Instead, they took off down the trail and made it back to their cars. The whole time, they were able to hear the creature screaming off into the distance. The guy's father asked the uncle, "Why did you shoot at the creature?" And the uncle responded, "I'm pretty sure that was the devil." The entire classroom's mouths were wide open with amazement. That was one heck of a story, and I think about it often. What is really out in the woods? My name is Lexi, and in 2007, my parents sent me to a summer camp up in Alaska. This camp was famous for its fun adventures, and I really wanted to go. I get there the first day, and the camp is everything I wanted it to be. The food was great, the scenery was amazing, and I made tons of friends. However, I was caught by surprise about the bear protocol. The bear protocol is pretty much what it sounds like. When any camper sees a bear, they're supposed to run to this tower and hit this button. That sounds the siren for the rest of the camp. Once you hear the siren, you are supposed to go to the nearest building and wait inside. Alaska has its fair share of bears, but the bears typically stay away from the camp, and as long as there's no food out. Anyways, here's where things get spooky. My group was coming back from a canoe trip down at the lake. Camp counselors had to shuttle us down there in trucks, 5 at a time. There were 20 of us that day, so the camp counselor had to make 4 trips. Each trip took about 10 minutes or so, there and back. Once we were all down at the lake, we were then able to go canoeing and fishing. Near the end of the day, the camp counselor blew his whistle, which meant for all of us to meet back at the truck. He loaded 5 campers in the truck and took off down the trail. Instead of being gone for 10 minutes, he was gone for 30. When the counselor finally returned, we saw that the front end of the truck was completely mangled and covered in blood. He apologized for the wait and told us that on his way up there that he accidentally hit a moose, but for some reason he seemed very panicked about it. And then I remembered what they said about food being left out. That moose would have been a huge meal for the bears. I waited with my friends as the counselor took another group of 5 back to camp. At this time, it was starting to get dark, and me and my friends were getting nervous. We began to look at the tree line, looking for any signs of bears or any creatures that might have eaten the moose. While the counselor was away, we began to hear a sound that was very familiar. It was the sound of the bear alarm. The anxiety that we were feeling before now turned into a full-on panic. We were literally sitting ducks with nowhere to hide. All that we could do was wait on our counselor to come back. The counselor eventually came, and we all packed into the truck. We felt somewhat safe in the truck, knowing that the bears couldn't get us inside. But my camp counselor told us not to look outside the windows on the drive back. I thought this to be strange, and it made me nervous thinking about it. Why wouldn't the camp counselor want us looking out the windows? What was he hiding? Some of the campers began to cry. I was pretty close to tears myself, but I did as he asked, and I looked away from the windows. Halfway through the drive back up, the counselor slammed on the brakes. I knew that we weren't back yet, and that we were still on that dirt trail. Against the counselor's command, I looked out the window to see what was going on. On the dirt path, I could see the moose, and that there was something standing over it, but it wasn't a bear. There was a pale creature hunched over the body of the moose. I could tell that the creature was very tall, despite it being hunched over, due to its limbs being very long. I didn't get a great look at it, because the counselor then took off down the dirt road. I could tell that he was startled. He kept checking the rearview mirror, seeing if that thing followed us, but it didn't. We got back to camp not much later. Everyone was inside the dining hall. The bear alarm was still blaring. Initially, I didn't tell anyone what I saw, mainly because I couldn't believe it. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the way the headlights were shining on the animal made it look strange. I was trying to talk myself out of what I saw, in order to make sense of everything. That night, all the counselors held a special meeting with all the campers. They told us that due to there being a bear nearby, that we had the option to either stay another week or to go home. Naturally, I opted to leave. The counselors contacted my parents, and I went home the next day. I still couldn't get the image out of my mind of that creature. I got home and the summer continued as normal. 2 weeks passed and I almost completely forgot about the creature at the campsite, until one day my father came up to me randomly, telling me some startling news. He told me that the camp I was just at had a bear attack, and that 2 campers went missing. He told me that he was really proud of me that I was able to make an adult decision to come home early. About a month later, they found the 2 bodies of the missing campers. Now normally, I would write this off as a bear attack, but the 2 bodies that they found were found in trees. It is possible that a bear could have done that, but it doesn't seem likely to me. I think whatever that creature was that I saw that night had something to do with it.